J'ai du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
In Phoenix, in an interview with ABC News, the president admitted lives will be lost during the reopening of our country currently underway. He said workers wishing to return to work, quote, should have no problem getting tested. We should point out that's certainly not the truth that citizens and workers are finding across this country. He compared the death toll as it stands right now with filling up Yankee Stadium with death, as he put it. About the economy, he said, it is what it is, and quickly added, quote, even the Democrats aren't blaming me for that. When asked about why he diminished the threat of the coronavirus early on, he said again today, quote, I want to be a cheerleader for this country. Back in the real world tonight, the death toll here in the U.S. stands at 70,972. The number of confirmed cases now well over 1.2 million, but we quickly add, as we always do, only about 2% of our population has been tested at all. And tonight, a new whistleblower complaint from the government's top vaccine official paints a damning portrait of the administration's response to this pandemic. Dr. Rick Bright alleges he was reassigned last month for refusing to embrace that anti-malaria drug the president repeatedly pitched as a possible treatment. In his written complaint, Bright says he, quote, opposed the broad use of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine as lacking scientific merit, even though the administration promoted it as a panacea and demanded that New York and New Jersey be flooded with these drugs. He also, quote, felt an urgent and compelling need to inform the American public that there was insufficient scientific data to support the use of these drugs for COVID-19 patients. There's also this on the issue of personal protective equipment and medical supplies. Quote, Dr. Bright was alarmed about the scarcity of critical resources and supplies, including N95 masks, swabs, syringes, and began clashing with Health and Human Services leaders as he pressed for them to take appropriate action to address these shortages. The complaint also notes, quote, Dr. Bright acted with urgency to begin to address this pandemic, but encountered resistance from HHS leadership, including Secretary Azar, who appeared intent on downplaying this catastrophic threat. During a conference call this afternoon, Bright described his experience.
Time after time, I was pressured to ignore or dismiss expert and scientific recommendations, and instead to award lucrative contracts based on political connections. In other words, I was pressured to let politics and cronyism drive decisions over the opinions of the best scientists we have in government. We are in an extraordinarily difficult global crisis, and the worst might still be ahead of us. Americans need to have all the facts. They need to know the truth about this pandemic. They need to be able to trust that their government and the information that they hear from politicians is based on scientific merit.
Dr. Bright is asking for his old job back and a special counsel investigation. He's also scheduled to testify before a House committee next Thursday, the 14th. Today's other big pandemic news concerns the White House Coronavirus Task Force. While in Arizona today, the president essentially confirmed the White House is in the process of demanding the task force at a time when coronavirus cases are just now ramping up in some parts of our country.
Vice President Pence said there are discussions underway about winding down the task force. Is that a good idea during a pandemic?
Well, I think we're looking at phase 2 and we're looking at other phases. Mike Pence and the task force have done a great job, but we're now looking at a little bit of a different form, and that form is safety and opening, and we'll have a different group probably set up for that.
Are you saying mission accomplished?
No, not at all. The mission accomplished is when it's over.
Earlier, the vice president, who, don't forget, runs the task force, said the White House is looking at Memorial Day as a date for closing out the task force. This is happening, of course, as more states open up, as infection rates continue going up, and as new models warn the situation could get much worse as we head into the summer and fall.
With the doctors saying that there might be a recurrence of coronavirus in the fall, can you just explain why is now the time to wind down that task force?
Well, because we can't keep our country closed for the next 5 years. I'm not saying anything is perfect. And yes, will some people be affected? Yes. Will some people be affected badly? Yes. But we have to get our country open, and we have to get it open soon.
As we mentioned, the president was in Arizona on his first trip outside the Washington area in almost 2 months. He flew there to tour a Honeywell factory making N95 masks for the government. Trump did not wear a mask to tour the mask factory, and peer pressure perhaps got the better of those in his circle who also opted to go without masks, though in close contact with people nonetheless. In the "they can't make this up" category, here was the music blaring during the president's visit to one workstation.
This is the material that traps the particulates.
For those scoring at home, that was indeed live and let die. Trump, as you saw, did wear goggles, and before leaving, he was interviewed by ABC News.
How many deaths and how much suffering are you willing to accept to get back where you want to be? Do you see it that way? Do you believe that's the reality we're facing, that lives will be lost to reopen the country?
It's possible there will be some, because you won't be locked into an apartment or a house or whatever it is.
For any American worker who's nervous about going back, if they want to get tested to see if they've been exposed to the virus, they can have access to both the antibody tests.
They should have no problem.
And
they should have no problem. And as good as this is, we're even getting better. We came up, don't forget, the cupboard was bare.
What did you do when you became president to restock those cupboards that you say were bare?
Well, I'll be honest, I have a lot of things going on. We had a lot of people that refused to allow the country to be successful. They wasted a lot of time on Russia. That turned out to be a total hoax. Then they did Ukraine, and that was a total hoax. Then they impeached the President of the United States for absolutely no reason.
It is Wednesday, the 6th of May of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? Oh my. Boy, there's a lot of religion out there, and I'll tell you what the biggest religion is. Yeah. It's all faith. Just think good thoughts. And the 3,000 dead a day won't mean as much as you think it is. Remember when a little over 3,000 died in one day on 9/11? And what a national calamity that was? And it only happened once. Now we're talking about it happening every day for we don't know when the end will be. But the mission abandoned sign has been put up on the USS Typhoid Mary. That's right. We're going to get rid of that task force. Now, I could have gone without the task force, with Trump going up there and giving these 2-hour campaign speeches. I would have liked to have the task force give us some information like they were supposed to. So not seeing that is fine. I would have liked to have had some more, work done. Because 3,000 dead a day is not success. It's only success if you've had bone spurs and went to a military-themed school and call the American people warriors who should die for the economy. It's their patriotic duty. Yet this guy has bone spurs, and that's why he's the president instead. All right. Yeah. It's maddening. It's just so maddening. And you know what? I also, on both the Associated Press and Reuters, had an article about how Biden's lead in the polls has disappeared dramatically because people prefer Trump's leadership on the pandemic and the economy. And where did this poll come from? I couldn't even read the article. It just was so out of left field. I couldn't figure out. And then I realized, you know what they did? They interviewed that Pennsylvania diner full of Trump lovers again. They didn't interview the I believe it was at Honeywell that Trump showed up in Arizona at yesterday without a mask. They didn't interview those workers because as soon as Trump came in and got close and the cameras were on, somebody cranked up Live and Let Die. Wasn't on when he started, then it got cranked. Wow. Was that by accident? No. Is that just how it's done on the shop floor? Yeah. That's how it can be done on the shop floor. And it was. Yeah, that was great. That made for a nice little clip, and we got to hear that at the top. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Okay, so we have Mission Abandoned as emblazoned by the banner on the USS Typhoid Mary. And I guess 3,000 dead a day? That's not too bad, especially if it's black and poor people. Maybe we can double that number. I think that's what they're looking at. I was accused of playing the race card because I made that little joke. Always playing the race card. Why can't you preach love and happiness and just getting along? Why is it that bigots are always the ones that pull out the race card, canard? You're playing the race card. Well, why, you want me to stop playing the race card because it preaches division. Well, how about stopping being a bigot? That would go miles and miles toward extending goodwill. It's always the bigots. Always. And I'm tired of it. I really am. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being accused of the one who's preaching division when we've got idiots out waving the American flag as if that makes them patriots and anybody who wears a mask is a commie. Don't tell me about preaching the politics of division when you're backing a hate monger like Donald Trump. God, and in my timeline, and some of these people I've known since junior high, they have no idea. They cannot figure out why people think that Trump is a mobster. They never heard that he paid a $25 million fine on his fraudulent Trump University. You show them the articles, and they don't believe it. They say it's fake. It's just made up. If I didn't have a personal involvement with people that I know who have died and are suffering dramatic suffering, tragic suffering because of this pandemic, this virus. If I didn't have that personally going on, I guess I could be gaslit and pretend, oh, it's not happening. Yeah, I might have some family in Salem, Oregon, and now they've had like the largest one-day hospitalizations of people with the COVID yesterday. Pretend that's the state capital, and they're pretending that those numbers are just made up. Those commie nurses, where are? And it's us that are preaching the politics of division. It's always projection with these bigots. These neo-Nazis, and that's what they are. They're petty fascists. They're brown shirts. They're shock troops. They feel free to be able to drive a pickup down a Georgia street and run down a black guy jogging to keep in shape and shoot him dead. And the Georgia police officer or captain said, justifiable. Yeah, but if that video clip hadn't made it out on social media, do you think there'd be a grand jury being convened to look into this? It was a lynching. I made the bad mistake of seeing it. I can't watch this stuff anymore. Being told about it is dissonant enough. But I saw that. I wish I hadn't. But I guess I'm glad I did. Because, yeah, always playing the race card. Always preaching the politics of division. It's always us that don't do that. And it absolves the other side, and they are the true patriots? No, they're a bunch of brainwashed automatons who have no construct or understanding of how America is held together by the gossamer wings of agreement. They don't want to be good neighbors. They can't be forced to be good neighbors. They hate America, and most of all, they hate Americans. Only because they think they are the only true Americans, and the rest of us should be 3,000 dead a day. Maybe that number can be doubled. Let's see if we can do it by opening up everything. So the local cafe never once said that they were only going to be doing takeout and curbside, delivery type thing. When they talked about being open, I think they were testing the waters. Well, someone called the health department on them, and of course, that's like somebody was a snitch. I don't think anybody had to call the health department when they made a public pronouncement on Facebook and elsewhere, and never once said, we're going to do takeout. They made it sound like they were going to do sit down. Someone talked to them, and they assured the health department we're only doing takeout, and good for them. They should do takeout. Why did they wait so long? I guess maybe they wanted to take a little vacation and get their small business loan that got taken by Applebee's instead. So that way they can blame it on our Democratic Governor, Kate Brown, every Democratic member of Congress and the Senate, and all the commies, the commie cowards here in town wearing face masks. Blame it on them. Yeah, it's us that teach and preach the politics of division. What is on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, of course, at the top, we did hear Brian break it down for us, and thank you. On the rest of the menu, amid a massive COVID death toll in facilities caring for aging veterans, a group of senators are seeking an investigation into the Department of Veteran Affairs and their Mar-a-Lago overseers. Yeah, all decisions happen at Mar-a-Lago, and it's pretty tough right now to get those decisions made. A federal judge ruled Gavin Newsom's pandemic stay-at-home order did not violate the constitutional rights to free assembly and religion. Indeed. And Congressional Republicans who threw a hissy fit when the House subpoenaed Trump's financial records last year have remained unusually quiet now that the fight has reached the Supreme Court. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte ordered the country's oldest and most influential TV network off the air. And why? Because they criticized Duterte. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And Romania's former anti-graft chief wins her case in the European Court. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice our Patreon page, and thank you to those who have become recurring Patreons of Netroots Radio. Your recurring contribution, patronage, has helped us continue to pay our bills, which continue to rise, by the way. I keep getting a bill from each of the vendors and whatnot, and every single one has raised their costs during a pandemic. Why? Well, I guess it was in the actuary schedule, and that's going to happen no matter what. But regardless, the only way we can continue resisting and broadcasting as we do is to fly under the radar. And how do we fly under the radar? You pay your bills. Yeah, you don't give them an opportunity to, kick you off, willy-nilly. They got to do a little bit of work. And because of your recurring patronage, we have been able to do that. And thank you for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended, indeed. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. How simple is that? Tom takes care of the Twitter feed there, so thank you, Tom. I, of course, take care of at Justice Putnam, and I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that linked up on social media. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. Is that Apple Podcasts now? Aren't they the same? I think so. But really, wherever podcasts can be found. Deezer. You can pick them up on Deezer. Yeah. All right, we better dive into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, because my beginning rant went for a long time. Oh, my. And this comes out of the Associated Press by Alana Durkin-Richer. A group of U.S. senators is seeking an investigation into the Department of Veteran Affairs' oversight of homes for aging veterans amid a spate of coronavirus deaths at the state-run centers. In a letter sent yesterday, Tuesday, the senators asked the head of the Government Accountability Office to look into the VA and states' roles in ensuring veterans get proper care at the homes, and whether the agency or states have a system to capture real-time spikes in mortality rates, among other things. Well, knowing that the VA is run by some friends of Trump at Mar-a-Lago when they're sitting around a table, I don't think they have a system that can capture real-time spikes in mortality rates. They don't even know what a mortality rate is. Given the importance of state veterans' homes in Virginia in the Veteran Affairs overall portfolio for providing institutional care to veterans, and our ongoing concerns about VA's role monitoring states' operation of these facilities, we would like the GAO to conduct a more detailed examination of the VA's oversight of state veterans' homes, quality of care, wrote Democratic Senators Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey of Massachusetts, Bob Casey of Pennsylvania, and John Tester of Montana, the ranking member of the Veterans Affairs Committee. Why are they just practicing the politics of division? Why do they have to confront the Veteran Affairs and get the GAO involved? They're snitches. They hate America because they're practicing division by looking into how all these aging veterans are dying. Don't they love America? The request comes as outrage builds over the death of more than 70 veterans sickened by the virus at a home in Massachusetts alone. State and federal officials are now investigating the deaths at the Soldiers' Home in Holyoke, where an additional 80 veterans and 81 staff members have tested positive for the virus. It is one of the deadliest known outbreaks at long-term care facilities in the U.S. And because we know about this, obviously it's spreading hate. Brian Melly of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. California Governor Gavin Newsom had the right to ban church assemblies in the interest of public health during the coronavirus outbreak. A federal judge ruled yesterday. Newsom's stay-at-home order did not violate the constitutional rights to free assembly and religion when the Cross-Culture Christian Center in Lodi was ordered to cease holding services, Judge John Mendez ruled in Sacramento. Pastor Jonathan Duncan had continued to assemble his congregation after the governor banned public gatherings in March, despite warnings it was in violation of state and local orders. The church of fewer than 50 members said it was obeying federal guidelines to prevent the spread of the virus. Lodi police entered the church during a service attended by about 30 worshipers in late March and said they were defying the governor's order. The church responded with a cease and desist letter sent to the city and argued that their First Amendment right to gather and practice their religion. Constitutional rights cannot be suspended by a virus, the church's attorney, Dean Broyles, said at the time. Police posted a notice on the building that its non-essential use created a public nuisance. San Joaquin County health officials then warned the church's landlord, Bethel Open Bible Church, it could face a misdemeanor charge if it allowed assemblies to continue. Duncan planned to hold Palm Sunday services on April 5th, but could not get in the church because his landlord changed the locks. Police threatened to cite anyone who entered the property. Duncan said in a statement that he was disappointed with the ruling, but would continue to fight for the right to worship. Well, look, Pastor, let me give you a little hint on how God works in the Christian construct. There's a thing called the triumphirative. You know, the Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost Spirit. And did you know that God is not only omnipotent, God is also omnipresent, as well as being omniprescient. But God, in the Christian construct, is omnipresent. What does that mean, Pastor? It means that God is everywhere. God is not confined within the confines of a church spreading a virus. God is everywhere. You can worship anywhere you want. You just can't do it next to another person in the confines of your church. That's the rule. You get to follow it like everybody else. Or else. Lawrence Hurley of Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Congressional Republicans who strenuously objected when a Democratic-led U.S. House of Representatives panel subpoenaed Donald Trump's financial records last year have remained unusually quiet now that the fight has reached the Supreme Court. Representative Jim, I didn't see any of those assaults happening in the showers when I was the wrestling coach at Ohio. Jordan, the House Oversight and Reform Committee senior Republican, described the move in an April 15, 2019 letter as an unprecedented abuse of the committee's subpoena authority to target and expose the private financial information of the President of the United States. Excuse me? That's what they're supposed to do, especially when he's a mobster. Follow the money. But neither Jordan nor other Trump allies in Congress or in state capitals have weighed in on the Republican president's legal effort. I should jump in real quick. The Netroots Radio style manual really prevents me from referring to Trump as the president. Yet sometime I have to do it because of the narrative and the way that the article is written. So I apologize for violating our style manual edict, which I made up, by the way. Well, his legal effort to block enforcement of the subpoena, which was issued to his longtime accounting firm, Mazars, LLP. The case has been consolidated with another one in which Trump is seeking to prevent enforcement of separate subpoenas from the House Intel and Financial Services Committees, targeting his financial records from Deutsche Bank and Capital One. The justices will hear arguments on May 12th in those cases, and a third one seeking similar records. Rulings are expected by the end of June, ahead of the November 3rd election in which Trump is seeking a second term. And you can rest assured, Trump and his team are going to try everything they can to get that ruling past the November 3rd election. Yeah. The third case involves Trump's effort to block a subpoena issued to Mazars as part of the Manhattan District Attorney's criminal investigation of Trump and his family real estate business. Unlike in other politically charged cases, his high-profile allies in Congress and in Republican-governed states like Texas have not filed amicus briefs in support of Trump with the Supreme Court. His only major supporter is his own U.S. Justice Department, led by Bill Barr. Such briefs are an avenue to express formal legal support and furnish information to influence the court's decision-making. Now, Jordan did not provide comment for this story, and a House Republican aide said Congressional Republicans see the dispute as just between Democrats and Trump. Unlike other recent presidents, Trump has refused to make public his tax returns and other financial records. His lawyers have argued that the U.S. Constitution gives a president sweeping protection from scrutiny by Congress, prosecutors, and the judiciary. But I guess you can only believe that if you just throw away over 200 years of American presidents, jurisprudence, and history. That's the only way. All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, there are some stargirls waiting in the sky. When female directors Bert and Bertie think back to their childhoods, they don't remember movies about girls banding together to adventure. So today, they've joined up with scriptwriter Lucy Alibar and have made the quirky comedy Troop Zero. Troop Zero is set in the fictional poor small town of Wiggly, Georgia. The biggest fiction, by the way, is that it's the late 70s, and Wiggly is impossibly integrated with no racial tension. That's part of this film's fantasy. You just have to go with it. So like I said, it's 77 and the Voyager spacecraft are about to launch with gold records containing greetings from Earth's children, and NASA has come to Wiggly. Why? Because the winning scout troop in the Birdie Scout Jamboree will be this country's voice. Enter 9-year-old Christmas Flint, played by McKenna Grace. Christmas has recently lost her mom, and her father, comedian Jim Gaffigan, has told Christmas that her mom is up in space with the stars. So of course, Christmas must be on that record, and it's going to take her father's assistant, Viola Davis, who is also a producer in the film, and a cobbled-together troupe of fellow outcasts to win the Jamboree and get on that record. They must beat the perfect Pretty Mean Girl troupe, then mothered by the meaner Miss Massey, played by Allison Janney. Our troupe needs badges in challenging gender roles for women and men, celebrating their own unique worths, and overcoming both the environmental and personal stressors that would keep them from banding together. Troop Zero is a story about following dreams. It's a story about resilience. It's a story about asserting that you deserve to be seen. It's a movie packed with principles and goals, but the Berts and Alabar hold it all together with a little bit of hand-waving, and without it being heavy or preachy. Unless you're in the KKK, you hate Ziggy Stardust, or you're advising Mike Pence on conversion therapy, Troop Zero will be a feel-good movie for bad-feeling times. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Suzanne Bard. We recognize our friends' faces, and we're not alone. Many social animals can identify individuals of their own species by their facial features. That's important because they need to be able to adjust their behavior depending on who they encounter. And research has shown that some species of monkeys, birds, and domesticated animals can even distinguish among different faces by looking at photographs alone. Scientists have also wondered whether domesticated animals that have coexisted with people for thousands of years can recognize different human faces. For example, we've shared more than 5,000 years of our history with horses. Plus, they can live up to 30 years and may need to retain a great deal of information about us throughout their lifetimes. Ethologist Léa Lonsad of the French National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment did an experiment to find out how well horses can recognize individual people in photographs. She and her team first taught the horses how to choose between two side-by-side images by touching their noses to a computer screen. The horses were then shown photos of their current keeper alongside faces of unfamiliar humans. They had never seen photos of any of the people before. The horses correctly identified their current keeper and ignored the stranger's face about 75% of the time, significantly better than chance. What's more, the horses also preferentially picked photos of their previous keeper, a person they hadn't seen in 6 months. In fact, even though the horses didn't get it right every single time, they were at least as accurate in picking out their previous keeper as they were at identifying their current one. The findings are in the journal Scientific Reports. The results suggest that not only can horses differentiate between familiar and unfamiliar human faces, they intuitively understand that photographs are two-dimensional representations of real life, without any other cues such as odor or sound. And they're even better at this than our oldest animal companion, the domestic dog. In addition, horses seem to have a robust long-term memory for human faces, consistent with their long lifespan and history of domestication. In future experiments, the researchers would like to test whether looking at photos of people that they have had bad experiences with in the past might cause horses to act anxious or even avoidant. So maybe think twice before doing anything at a stable that might give a horse a long face. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Suzanne Bard.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. After a storm or disaster, it's important to eat only safe food. Throw away perishables like meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and leftovers stored above 40 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours or more. Throw away food with an unusual odor, color, or texture. Throw away food that may have come in contact with floodwater, including food in swollen, punctured, and damaged cans. When in doubt, throw it out.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
To His Excellency the Governor, from the ACLU, Ray, the 2020 elections, and the coronavirus pandemic. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The April 22nd letter to Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker and other high state officials begins with two undeniable propositions: that voting is a fundamental right, and that the coronavirus pandemic should not be allowed to compromise that right. The letter commends the Secretary of the Commonwealth, who oversees elections, for having concluded that a voter qualifies for an absentee ballot if the voter is ill or quarantined or staying at home or avoiding a polling place as a precautionary measure, and then highlights other necessary steps, including robust education and funding to ensure that widespread voting by mail takes place, which will require, among other things, the printing and distribution with postage prepaid return envelopes of absentee and early voting ballots in a number of languages. The state should also expand early voting from the present 11 days before an election to 20 or 30. For those who will need to vote at polls on Election Day, a sufficient number of polling places is vital, because enough polling places in appropriate locations, along with mail-in and early and absentee voting, will shorten lines, allow greater physical distancing, and help protect poll workers and voters alike, all of which is critical at this time to the preservation of democracy. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1935. That was the day that began a strike of lumber workers across the Pacific Northwest. Lumbermen had had enough of long hours, dangerous working conditions, and low pay. Plans for the strike began at a meeting of the Sawmill and Timber Workers Union in late March. The union put together a list of demands. They wanted uniform working conditions and pay across the lumber industry and the right of union recognition. They called for a walkout on this day in labor history if progress toward these goals was not being met. Word of the impending strike began to spread in the local press. Since newspapers relied on the paper created by the industry, they closely followed the developments of the work action. Lumber company owners threatened to shut down operations before they would agree to recognize the union. Some workers, fed up with the pace of the negotiations, went on strike before the planned day. Workers at the Blodell Donovan plant in Bellingham, Washington, walked off the job. Once the strike was in full swing, 30,000 to 40,000 workers had joined them. 90% of the Northwestern lumber industry was impacted by the strike. As the strike wore on, angry owners called in the National Guard to help bring scabs to get the lumber mills back up and running. In Humboldt County in Northern California, 3 strikers were killed. On June 24th, strikers and troops clashed in what became known as the Battle of Tacoma, Washington. Troops used tear gas to disperse the picketers. In the end, the lumbermen won improvements in wages and hours, but the union did not win a standard agreement across the industry. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Wednesday, March 6, 2020. I'm Mark Boulanger. Labor unions are at the forefront in the fights against the effects of the coronavirus. For example, the American Federation of Teachers has been implementing a series of actions in order to protect its members and students. The AFT has 1.7 million members in 3,500 locals across the country. The AFT's president, Randy Weingarten, explained her union's approach to the crisis in a recent webinar which involved a number of unions from Latin America.
I know that many of the Latin American countries are about 4 or 5 weeks behind the United States in terms of the pandemic in and of itself. But then we have the leaders more callous, more cruel, more head in their sand. But what's happened is that because of the way they are, their narcissism, their psychosis, that for them, this is all about them. And they look to see what opportunities they had about this, like in Washington, Trump trying to stop immigration. Part of what's going on is that those countries that have people like Bolsonaro or Trump, we will actually be in worse shape because these leaders, while they did not create COVID, they have made it worse and will make it worse because of their downplaying of the illness and their defunding of public health structures and their completely psychotic and contradictory messages about what people should do and the pitting of the economy versus public health. So what were the first few steps we did? And what are the steps we're doing right now? So these are the 4 issues that we were focused on. Number 1 was the safety and well-being of our members and the communities they serve. We have 3,500 locals throughout the country. That essentially meant every single rural, suburban, and urban area. And we knew after a while that if they didn't close schools, we would have to force it because of the transmission of the disease. So that was how we closed schools, create grab-and-goes, create rec centers for kids, for childcare of essential workers, and also changing remote education on a dime. So number 1, the safety, well-being, and health of our members and the communities we serve. Number 2, focus like a laser on those who are safeguarding the rest of us. We happen to be the fastest growing healthcare union or nurse union. So we have a lot of nurses and respiratory therapists and others who are on the front line every single day trying to take care of others. How do we make sure they have a standard of enforcement so that they can get protected? How do we make sure that they have the proper PPE? The third was that since physical distancing is really the only way to mitigate in the absence of a vaccine, how do we deal with the economic impacts, short and long term, on workers that are unemployed, on workers who have lost their insurance, on families who somebody died, a worker died, and they no longer have insurance? Now, health insurance in other places are paid in different ways, but how do we deal with the fact that a lot of people are now out of work, almost 30 million, and how do we make sure that rent is paid, all these other things happen, the short term and then ultimately the long-term economic impacts of this economic catastrophe. And the fourth, particularly since we have Donald Trump as president, is how do we make sure we safeguard our next election? We have no idea what's going to happen in November and October, but how do we safeguard that election? How do we have things like vote by mail? But how do we make sure we have an election in November and that we safeguard it? These are the 4 things that we've been working on almost day and night as we've moved to virtual.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about caring for each other through global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, weather from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Expected to be a tad cooler than yesterday. We were bumping 80 here at the mothership. Supposed to be down around 70, which means it's really going to be about 75. Winds will be out of the north-northeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Sunny conditions should prevail, though they say it's partly cloudy now. And I just see a couple of wisps of foggy-type clouds laying low and burning off. Tonight will be clear to partly cloudy, lows in the upper 40s, low 50s, winds out of the north at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Tomorrow, we're going to shoot up to the mid-80s with a few clouds from time to time, and winds will be light and variable, and overnight lows should continue being in the upper 40s, low 50s. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County here in southern Oregon stands at 49, and deceased stands at none that we know about because we can't test like we should be doing. Grass pollen here locally, right here at the mothership, is moderate with grass pollen, of course. I just said that. And the regional air quality index is good at 39 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is high at 6. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.41 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 90%. I should mention that we had quite a bit of rain last night, maybe a little over a tenth of an inch, and there were quite a few puddles this morning when I awoke. Good for that, because the ground needs all the rain it can get. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 63 and sunny, and they got coronavirus. Paris is 70 degrees and sunny, and everybody wants to go out and smell the flowers, but there's a lot of coronavirus. Rome is 76 and fair with another spike in deaths and infections because of coronavirus. Oh, yeah, they've been lessening their restrictions, and now they're getting, 2 weeks later, coronavirus. Kyiv is 51 degrees with a light rain shower and coronavirus. Kabul is 66 and fair with coronavirus. Hong Kong is 79 degrees, partly cloudy, and, they're getting spikes of coronavirus because they just want to get out and mingle. Tokyo is 60 degrees with rain and a lot of coronavirus that the government is saying that they're going to have severe lockdowns over. Sydney, Australia is 56, partly cloudy, and they better not congratulate themselves too much on defeating coronavirus because it's not defeated. San Francisco, California is 53 degrees and fair, and Gavin Newsom had to, remind people, hey, the lockdown is because people are dying from coronavirus. And New York is 52 degrees Fahrenheit, cloudy, with hopefully a flattening from coronavirus. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Jim Gomez of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The leading broadcast network in the Philippines went off the air under government order yesterday, Tuesday, sparking shock over the loss of a major news provider during the coronavirus pandemic and accusations of targeting a presidential critic. The National Telecommunications Commission ordered ABS-CBN Corp. to stop operating after its 25-year congressional franchise ended on Monday. The network's application for a renewal has been pending in Congress, which is controlled by Duterte's allies, but hearings have been delayed in part by the coronavirus lockdown. ABS-CBN, one of the country's oldest and most influential networks, broadcast on TV and radio for most of Tuesday, but later went off the air. Media watchdogs accused Duterte and his government of muzzling independent media like ABS-CBN that have reported critically on issues including Duterte's anti-drug crackdown, in which thousands of mostly poor drug suspects have been killed. Government officials denied the closure was a press freedom issue, insisting that everyone must comply with the law. And what is that law? Don't criticize Duterte.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Anonymous worker bees at the Associated Press bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The European Court of Human Rights said yesterday, Tuesday, that Romania violated the right to a fair trial and the right to free speech of the former head of the country's anti-corruption office, who has since become the European Union's first chief prosecutor. The court, based in Strasbourg, France, found in its unanimous ruling that there had been no way for Laura Codruta-Kövesi, who was fired in July of 2018, to make a court claim against her removal from office, while her freedom of expression was violated because of her dismissal for criticizing the government's anti-corruption legislation. The court also found that Kövesi's firing may have had wide-ranging repercussions within Romania's judicial system. Kövesi said the ruling would help strengthen judicial independence across the continent. We all know that my dismissal was part of an intimidation campaign against the justice system in an attempt to discourage the fight against corruption, she said. This ruling strengthens the position of all European magistrates, defending them from discretionary political interference. Kövesi spent 5 years as the head of the Romanian Anti-Corruption Directorate, achieving remarkable results. Those indicted included 14 cabinet members, 53 lawmakers, and a Romanian member of the European Parliament. In Romania, her removal was seen as political retaliation for her department's successes. Indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio will broadcast on. In fact, we're going to meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursday. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, tes dentelles et tes théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.